And what I've tried to cultivate is a space where people can show up and they may not see what they're capable of. They may not see themselves in the same way that this community is capable of seeing them. And as they experience that, feeling seen, feeling appreciated, being like, oh, I'm so glad you're here today, that they begin to see in themselves something that they didn't see before. And that I've seen as a pivotal point, because that person then becomes the builder of community in their own way.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This is a special episode coming from a live discussion that took place at the Brooks Hyperion House around the Boston Marathon. Thank you to Brooks for organizing this panel and bringing so much to the running community in Boston and beyond. The Brooks Hyperion Elite 3s were released earlier this month, and it's Brooks' latest road shoe built for speed with ultralight foam and a carbon fiber plate to help propel you forward. And I've loved it in workouts so far. Thanks again to Brooks for helping to support this episode and conversation. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. I've learned it isn't nearly as hard as you think. Freedom Solar Power makes it simple. They provide a turnkey solution that is focused on educating their customers on the experience from installation to everyday use and savings. They ensure you have all the information needed to make sure going solar is right for you. From firsthand experience, it makes sense both financially and for the environment. With no down payment required, solar not only adds immediate value to your home, but it's also great for the environment and might even provide immediate savings, not to mention the year-end tax benefits, a credit of 26% this year. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida, and there are plenty of other great options nationwide. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode. Tracksmith just released their spring collection, and as a season shift yet again, I'm proud to continue this partnership with them. Tracksmith is a brand for committed runners like you and me, people who know that the best part of a busy day is squeezing in a workout. They offer products for training, racing, and rest days, which you know I'm a fan of, and create experiences that make running more rewarding, more connected, and more meaningful. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN, all one word, will receive free shipping, and 5% of your purchase amount will be donated to the Michael J. Fox Foundation to help find a cure and support those living with Parkinson's.
Good morning. Now you do need to stop. I've lost it. I had it and I lost it. Good morning. We're going to try to get this going here. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Brooks Hyperion House for day 2. My name is Matt Weiss. I'm one of the Brooks employees, lucky enough to be here this week. And on behalf of the entire team at Brooks, we want to welcome you here and thank you for coming out. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate it. I don't see my mom in the audience, so I'm going to keep this brief because no one is here to see me. I'm making that joke at every panel. These folks were here yesterday. I thought I would get through at least 2 without repeating myself, but so again, no one's here to see me, so we're going to keep this brief, but going to turn it over to Jonathan Levitt, host of the For the Long Run podcast, who's going to moderate a panel for us today about the Boston Run community. I am a proud New Yorker, very proud New Yorker, dislike most things about Boston, but I've always had unbelievable admiration for the run community and spirit here. My out of office this week actually says I'm attending the greatest race in the world. I love the Boston Marathon. And I've always been a huge admirer of the Boston run community and all the things that they're doing. And so I'm, quite frankly, very excited for this discussion. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jonathan and take it from here.
Amazing. Thanks so much for this opportunity. And yes, this is the greatest race in the world, year after year. So first, welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for helping to make it the greatest race in the world, because it's not just an incredible route, it's an incredible community. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to sort of set the stage, let's go through some intros. We have Dana. Dana, can you give us a quick little, who's Dana?
Sure. So my name is Dana, and I'm one of the co-leaders of November Project Boston.
And Sid?
Sidney Baptista, founder of Pioneers Run Crew and Pioneers Performance Streetwear.
And Emily?
I am Emily Saul. I'm one of the co-leaders of the Boston November Project community.
And Amy?
I'm Amy Tortorello, and I am a Heartbreak Flyer, and I coach with Heartbreak Hill Running Company.
So when Brooks reached out and they said, we need someone to talk about the Boston Run community, they found me, a guy who happens to live in Boulder at the moment. So I love this group. I got into the Boston Run community from November Project, which is represented here and by a couple of the people out in the crowd today. I know what my definition of community is, but I'm curious of what it is for you guys. So let's go. And by the way, this is going to be an interactive panel, so please feel free to raise your hand if you want to say something or do burpees or whatever you need to do.
I already said burpees are not a part of Run. So,
well, we're talking community. Amy, what is community for you?
Community for me, I think, is... I think when I think about the Boston running community in particular, it really brings together a whole bunch of different groups of people. I think something that we always say at Heartbreak is that we celebrate diversity of person and pace. So it isn't only about running fast. It isn't only about winning races, but really kind of just having a lot of fun and bringing different groups of people together.
I definitely think about community as a place to come together. I think we spend a lot of our lives feeling really independent, sometimes feeling alone, navigating, how we move from families into independence and grow up and that sort of thing. And so, especially when I think about it in the context of November Project and how I've known it, that it's a space where people can come and feel like you have a place where you belong, feel like you have people who see you, who welcome you, who are excited for you to be there. Where you don't have to feel alone or on your own as you're navigating challenges of fitness or life.
When I think of community, I think of a village. When I think of community, I think of a village of people coming together and doing things and supporting each other and stepping in where something may be needed or where something's missing and being a part of whatever it is you're doing and then kind of taking it and making it a part of your own. And so when I think about it in running and what we built in our running community, I think of the people who have come along and who've built it and created it and who's carrying it on as it grows.
I think for me, when I think about what it feels like to be in community, it's this experience of being supported unconditionally. I think that, anybody who spends a Saturday or a Sunday out on the marathon course, whether you're training for the marathon or not, you're running by people who, like Amy said, it's diversity of pace and person. You've got people from all over the place coming and running on these hills, and everybody's cheering each other on. You can throw a hand out and it doesn't really matter. It's like this leveling ground of we're all coming from very different places, but we're all here to just do the same thing, which is to go out and run. And I think that when we show up from whatever corners we're coming from in the world, it feels like, okay, there's this part of me that's very supported and belongs here. And so I think that's a really important facet of the running community here in Boston.
A couple of you have talked about the feeling of feeling seen and feeling included. I love the exploration of why somebody starts doing something. And so my beginning with fitness was through November Project. We had a couple beers at a Red Sox game and showed up the next day. It was a pretty easy start. There wasn't much pushing. I'm curious with each of you, first, why did you show up that first time to whatever group it is, to that first run? And why are you still doing it? Particularly, Emily, you've been doing what you're doing since 2014 in a very similar capacity for 8 years.
Yeah,
it's good math.
Yeah, goes the other way.
And I caveat this by saying most of you have shown up to a community in some capacity, but we'll also be sharing this with the millions of listeners of For the Long Run podcast. So this is for them as well, who might not be showing up to a current community.
Well, I was just sharing with somebody yesterday that my initial exposure to November Project, which was started just a few years before I showed up for the first time by BG and Bogan. And when I looked at the website the first time, somebody had mentioned it to me and sent me a link, and I looked at it and I went, I don't get it.
I still don't get it.
And I also said, I don't think I need this. That was my first impression. I don't think I need this, because what I was focused on was, do I get out and run? Do I go? I actually was affiliated with Harvard. And so I would go to the Harvard Stadium and do the stairs on my own. And I didn't really think that at the time I needed it, because I was accountable to myself. But when I started showing up, and that's a longer, unnecessary story right now, when I started showing up, I distinctly remember a moment when I was right in the middle of the stadium. And this was maybe 3 or 4 months after I had started showing up regularly. And I looked around and I realized that what I felt was this sense of familiarity and a little bit like home, but a lot about what it had felt like as a collegiate athlete being a part of a team and feeling like it matters that I show up because people pay attention. They know that I'm there. They care that I'm there, that I'm excited to see other people, that we have this opportunity to challenge each other, but not in a like, you have to be better, but like, holy shit, look at you. This is amazing what you're doing, and them challenging me and wanting to really push myself. And I think that space was what made me want to continue. And as I've had an opportunity to be a co-leader of the community for the last almost 8 years, I think that's really been at the center of why I've continued to do it, and what I've tried to cultivate is a space where people can show up and they may not see what they're capable of. They may not see themselves in the same way that this community is capable of seeing them. And as they experience that, feeling seen, feeling appreciated, being like, oh, I'm so glad you're here today, that they begin to see in themselves something that they didn't see before. And that I've seen as a pivotal point, because that person then becomes the builder of community in their own way.
How do you help make that connection, or does it always happen organically?
I think it happens in both ways. I think people implicitly, when they feel like, I mean, I've watched people be like, I am a badass. I can do that. Like, I did that. Like, I did it well, man. I've seen people discover that in themselves, and it's like this light bulb goes off, and they look around wanting to see that in other people. And then they're like, yeah, I see you. I see you. So it's something that as I've discovered that feeling personally, and then as I've had more experiences with that, it's something that is very important to me. So I look around at a big community, and sometimes it's about building this big feeling of hype. And that's awesome. People want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. But it's also about noticing like who maybe has a slightly different energy today, and how are you? And just, do you need a hug, or, can I run with you? And that sort of connection, which also allows people to feel not just the big, but sometimes when they're not feeling so big, to feel seen and supported.
Cool. Sidney, I'm particularly curious your perspective here with Pioneers Run Club being intentional around diversity in ways that many other run groups aren't as intentional.
So I came into running at a weird time in my life. I had quit my corporate job to become an entrepreneur the first time around. I was creating, so I'd always had this passion to create experiences for communities of color because I had the opportunity to go away to school and travel with a big accounting firm, and really get to experience what other communities around the country were doing in their cities. And so I'd come back and try to do it here. So when my music festival career failed, I found myself struggling with identity, struggling with like, all right, you go to school for 4 years back, and then you're always doing something, you're moving on. And then I'm at this firm for 6 years and I don't see a future there. And then I jump into entrepreneurship, and that doesn't work. And so I found myself not really knowing what to do. And I was walking down Newbury Street and I saw a friend of mine, another Black man, running with a group. And I thought to myself, like, why is he doing this? Like, what is, and why is he smiling? Right. I think this was like 2014, 2015. But before I saw him doing it, it was nothing I would ever have considered. And sometimes I think of that, and it's like, if I didn't see, you guys, everyone knows Jarek. A lot of people know Jarek Walker. If I didn't see my buddy Jarek running, would there be a Pioneers Run Crew? Or, I'm sure there would have been something, but like, because I'm sitting here today because I saw another Black man do something that I didn't think I could do. Well, I didn't think that was a possibility for me. And so a big reason for Pioneers Run Crew is exactly that, for representation, for allowing for people, for kids, and for people to see that there's something that maybe that isn't normal for them in their communities, that could be normal. And so we're very intentional. So I got into running. It was all, it was going great, and I loved it. And I loved what it was doing for me and my mental health, and for what it was like bringing stability into my life. And I became a huge part of the Den Run Club, and then then joined the Heartbreakers and was a coach. But I found myself always being one of a few, like in this room, few Black people in these communities. And so 3-4 years into my journey, I was like, this time to go and bring this home, bring this to Dorchester. And that's when I created Pioneers Run Crew. And we're intentional about staying in Dorchester, running in those areas that aren't represented. Right now, as we speak, there is a marathon called 26 Point True going on in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, Hyde Park, all the parts of the city that people don't see when they come here for the Boston Marathon. And we're also intentional about putting people in leadership that represent the general community, and making sure that the people who join the community understand why we're created. You're welcome, but this is how it's run. And so I think that's important.
Thanks for sharing that. Dana and I were talking earlier before the podcast started about the experience of professional athletes being relatable to humans. And one of the things that I love about this arena and this space is that it's an equalizer. If you can look past all the differences, we experience fitness in similar ways. It's hard. If it's not hard, try harder, and it will be hard, like by definition. It was cool to hear her talking about seeing somebody who's been to the Olympics feel relatable in ways that are, maybe I should stop talking. Do you want to share this?
So I think I also joined November Project Boston about a little over 8 years ago. And at the time, what I was looking for was just like a space where it felt like I mattered. Post-graduation from college, it's like nobody tells you that it's hard to make friends as an adult, but it's kind of hard to make friends as an adult. Like, I don't know what to do. And I think that what I was looking for was a space where not only like did I fit in, but what I was actually like welcomed, not like trying to make myself fit into a space that wasn't actually for me, but to actually find a space that was exactly for me, where people accepted me as I am because of who I am, not because I'm trying to be somebody else. And so I think, I've been somewhat open. I had, pretty significant struggles with mental illness and, chronic medical issues. And so for me, the space was sort of hard because it required a level of vulnerability. And I wanted to be welcomed into a space, and I wanted to be accepted unconditionally. And I needed people to understand that I might not always, November Project's thing is come in, give everybody a hug. I have a trauma history. I don't actually always want everybody to touch me. And I think at first, for many months, I felt like I had to, because that's what we do here. We give hugs, and I wanted to be welcomed. What I found was that the more I started opening up to people and saying, actually, like, I'm really anxious. I'm scared. Like, people would just, reach their hand out and be like, that's okay. Like, what do you need? And I don't think I realized that the running community could be so much more than running. And the reason that I stay in the community, and the reason that when, Emily and our other co-leader, Chris, asked me to be a co-leader with them, the reason that I felt like I was like, I don't know that this is the right thing for me, but I do actually feel like somebody needs to be standing up there saying, there's a space for you. This isn't just about how fast you run or how many burpees you can do, but who are you? Like, who are you when you come here? Because I want you to know that if you're struggling with something that really you don't think has anything to do with fitness, everything has to do with, like, our whole identities are enmeshed. So you can't really separate, the struggles that you have outside in the world. You can't separate that from fitness. You bring that with you. So when I show up as a leader, it's really hard because there are a lot of days that I don't feel great, but knowing that I have this community around me that says, yeah, you're really fast. And also, like, we know you're really struggling, and they hold both of those two things. I think that's really, really important. So when I see people like Kara Goucher starting to speak out about her health diagnoses, that feels like okay, there's somebody else who wakes up and feels like they're not sure if they can like conquer the world that day, because I feel so alone sometimes when I wake up and I'm like, I have to show up and do this thing, but my body is in a lot of pain. And trying to balance those two things, I think it's so important to see those faces out there speaking up and to continue to build the running community beyond just running, beyond just fitness, and saying your whole self, not just, racial identity or gender identity or sexual orientation, but like whoever you are and whatever is going on in your life, we want to hold space for that so that it's not just about running.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that and going there. I've done a lot of podcasts with a lot of elite athletes, and what I've found to be fascinating is just how relatable they are, and the fact that everybody struggles with something, whether they talk about it or not. And so like that's why I like to go there with a conversation like this. I'm sure somebody in the audience has been, yeah, that's me. I totally feel that. So thank you for going there and sharing that. One of the things you mentioned was sometimes you don't feel like showing up, and you do anyways, because there's a community that's relying on you. So I'm curious for each of you, how do you show up when you don't want to? Let's start with Amy.
Well, last night I ran a mile on an indoor track, which was the first time I've ever stepped on an indoor track, because the brand new track at New Balance. And I was excited about it, but it's something that I definitely would never have done if I didn't have a team or a community of people behind me, both pumping me up, but also just like everyone was doing it. So I was like, I'll do it too. It sounds fun.
That's why I ran my first marathon.
Yeah. A lot of us.
That's the epitome of fitness community.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. I'll do it.
So I think it took something that for me was, I absolutely never, ever would have done 6 years ago. Probably not even 2 years ago, to be honest. But it took, this group of people behind me to get me to go there. And I ended up going, and I had a great time, and I'm struggling from it today. I also just ran the 5K. So, but yeah, I think, when you think about showing up, it really becomes, it's not just for yourself, it's for the people who are around you and the people who are working hard to really contribute back to this community. So
how do you show up when you don't really want to?
The Emily Saul experience.
I know, right? Well, I'll share one little bit of wisdom, and it comes from the context of November Project. Every city that November Project has a community has a workout on a Wednesday. And many, many years ago, someone shared with me that there's this idea of like 1 in 52. So if there's one Wednesday out of 52 that you're like, I just don't want to go, just don't want to be there, like that's okay. It might be 2 or 12 out of 52. I don't know. But I personally think we hold ourselves to really high standards. I think the more that you get into fitness, or the more that you get into sport or competitive athletics, we build this expectation that we're always supposed to be on or good, or that every run we go on is going to feel great, which is absolutely not true. Like
you run more than once a year.
And so it's more about just accepting our humanity. Like we're human. We get tired. We get overwhelmed. We get, exhausted by life sometimes. And so even when we're training hard and we have these big goals, it doesn't always mean that we can just imagine ourselves, to feel really good. So I think, showing up when you don't really want to, at least for me, it's in recognizing like, what is the value of showing up either anyway, or showing up in a way that is genuine and authentic. So, I've had many mornings when my responsibility is to like lead this great big community and be all of this positive energy. And I might get on the phone, Chris Capozzi and I have been leading NP for a long time together. And so we might get on the phone and 10 minutes before we're in front of everyone, be like, I don't really want to do this, man. And he's like, same, me too. I got 2 hours of sleep last night, and we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And it's sort of like, it starts with that, like, all right, I'll show up for you and you're going to show up for me. And together we're going to figure out how to show up for everybody else. And that's when we're in like a role of service. I think sometimes it's harder to show up for yourself because we get exhausted or we aren't really sure that we have more to give. But I think it really comes down to just being able to acknowledge that like, I'm human, this is normal. Like this isn't an indicator of me being broken or there being something wrong with me. It just means that like, I'm alive today and it's harder today than it was yesterday. All right. And then figuring out how do I take one step that's going to be in the service of me, like what's going to be best for me. So it might be that I go out and just like dig right in and make it happen anyway and trust that I'll be glad I did it at the other side. It might be that I just have to be really compassionate and offer some like grace for myself that I'm going to take it easy and wait until it feels just a little bit easier before I push. But so it's not about there being one simple solution, but I think it really is just about acknowledging that like we're all trying to figure it out and do our best. And we're not perfect. And as Dana was just describing so beautifully that, you know, we don't have to pretend to be perfect. I think it's actually a lot better when we acknowledge that we're human.
It's hard going after you. As she talks, you're so good. As you talk, I'm like, I'm going to talk about this. Oh no, I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about that. There's so many good points that you make.
Same.
So many good points that I could take it so many different ways, right? So I think when I first created a community, I was a solo founder of the space. And I think you kind of have to show up at the beginning. But I have a very weird relationship with running now because I have so many, you know, we're all runners, we have injuries, but I've been dealing with so many injuries that, you know, I haven't run a lot in the last 3 to 4 years. But the community that we've created, it's not just about running. You come to see the people, to continue the conversations you started. And when you create a community that has other leaders, some people can take that when you can't, right? And so I think that's important. I think that, and then showing up for the people who, when you do show up, their faces light up and they're excited to support. And I've had a lot of changes since I started this team. I've had a baby, he's 3 now, but in the beginning, like I probably didn't come to Pioneers Run Crew for a good, 3 months. And the community kept growing. And so even more recently, I created a running apparel line that I've been spending a lot of time at. And, and it's not what I do full time, but like the Pioneers Run Crew keeps growing. It keeps continuing to do. Here I am. I'm the leader of this space. We're holding a marathon and I'm not there. It keeps going. And so
how does that feel?
No, I mean, it's amazing. It's like, that's why when I think of community and the reason why I went with the village kind of analogy was that like, it's not just about one person. It's not just about, it's not just about one person. It's not even just about the running part. It's about like everyone coming together and really supporting where they can and adding where they can. And just kind of building something that's bigger than you and what you think could be. And so, and some days you don't show up and that's okay, and people check in on you, and give yourself some grace. There's a lot of, especially being an entrepreneur, there are times where I just like, I don't want to do it. I think I had a conversation, right? We had coffee and just like, this is hard. Like, this is very, very hard. This is impossible. And some days you just don't show up and then the next day you're back at it. And it's better to be naive about things too, because then you'll just go do it. You don't know how hard it is and you just don't do it. But so all the things Emily said, plus a little bit.
I mean, I have to go last. So I know you think it was hard for you, but I think that one of the things that's really amazing about showing up when you don't want to is that you realize how capable other people are of being leaders. So just because we're in the position of leadership does not actually mean that we are the leaders. The community exists because everybody shows up. So it's not my community, it's our community. So that has to mean that it can exist when I'm not there. Because if communities only exist because one person is there, then that's not a very strong community. So what I've found is that on the days that I don't feel particularly great, there is so much support out there. And if I say to anybody in November Project Boston, can you help me with this? I can't even tell you how willing people are to extend a hand to help because not just because they care about me, but because they care about the community, because it's ours. It's not just mine. And so I think that's one thing that I've really learned. But the other thing is in the honesty and transparency that I was mentioning earlier, someone was running with me this morning on our November Project run and said, how are you doing? Are you feeling good and healthy and excited? And I said, I'm not actually really any of those right now. And he was just like, I'm really sorry to hear that. I actually had a really bad day yesterday too. And there was just this moment that somebody from outside of our little conversation that I thought we were having was like, she trusted you enough in this relationship to tell you that she's actually not really okay. And I was like, yeah, because I trust him. I respect him. So I respect people in my community to be able to be honest and say if I need help, because if I don't do that, then I'm not actually showing up as my authentic self. And so I think it's important that we think about community as like the support structure for ourselves, but also for the community. And the only way that you can sort of continue to build a stronger foundation is to be fully authentically yourself. And that means sharing when things are hard and when you need help, and then also allowing the community to carry you through when you're having good times. I think you have to have both.
Love that.
Thanks again to Freedom Solar Power for supporting this episode of the podcast and our environment by providing an easy, green energy source. The buying process was fascinating and eye-opening, and I am excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious about going solar in your home, message me on Twitter or Instagram, and I'd be happy to help your journey by providing some great resources. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company that's been installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. Not in any of those states? Don't fret, my parents have the same panels from SunPower that were installed by a different company in Massachusetts. SunPower is the best in the business, and that's what Freedom Solar uses. I've enjoyed working with the whole team over at Freedom Solar, and I'm sure you will too. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting the podcast. I'm proud to partner with Tracksmith, and they're going to donate 5% of your order value to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful for Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN will contribute towards this donation. I have been loving their Harrier long sleeve and Alston half tights in particular.
How many of you have read the book Life is a Marathon by Matt Fitzgerald? Wow, I'm glad he's not in the room. He'd hate this. Anyway, Matt Fitzgerald wrote a book called Life is a... Sorry, Matt. I hope you're not listening to this podcast.
Anyone who wants one, John Levitt will send you a copy.
Yeah, right. No, I'm going to ask Matt. He's going to need this to build his ego up after this. Anyway, it's all about the experience of life related to sport. And endurance sport is a microcosm of life. Things are hard, then they get easier, then they get hard again, and then at some point you're done. Not to be morbid, but anyways, where I was going with that was so much of what we learn on the roads, on the trails, on the track can apply to life to make this experience that we all share so much easier, whether it's a diagnosis, whether it's a physical impairment, whether it's a mental impairment, whatever it might be. The things that we do with our fitness can help what's going on in our head. So I'm curious, when you are leading groups, are you thinking about this? How are you thinking about this? And how do you position like the Wednesday hill workout or the Friday hill workout or whatever it is in relation to like, I'm going to help you become a better human through fitness?
I think it's hardest to go first, personally. So
we can switch
if anyone else wants to take the first one, okay.
Sorry, I keep putting you on the spot.
I know. I get all these other ideas after I hear what you're all saying.
Amy's going to have the best answer.
Yeah, save me for last.
All right. Sorry, I wasn't. Can you repeat the question now?
How many of you have read the book Life is a Marathon? Sorry, Matt Fitzgerald. Anyway, Matt loves when people talk about him, so he'll be actually stoked to hear this, that I'm promoting his book. Anyway, the question is, in the pursuit of guiding people related to fitness, how do you put thought into helping people get more out of life through what they're doing with their fitness?
Okay, so full disclosure, I'm also a clinical social worker. So I
got
take
two
that,
on the panel, or a psychologist.
Yeah, so I take that with me everywhere I go. Outside of November Project, I actually teach group fitness and do personal training. So I think that what's interesting is I actually cannot take my social work hat off. I'm constantly caring about how people are doing. And I think that a lot of times I'm not the greatest coach because I care a lot more about how you're doing emotionally than I do about how fast you're moving or how many burpees you're doing. So it's a little bit of an interesting juxtaposition just because I do like to run fast and I do love to do like 100 burpees for fun. But I actually don't like to push other people to do that if it doesn't feel good in their body. And so when I'm standing up there, I am the last person to be like, go harder, go faster, push, come on, you can do it. Because I actually want people to do what feels good. And that does not always feel good to me. So people will say, are you going to crush your marathon? And I'm like, I don't know. I actually just want it to not suck. I hope I crush it, but really I hope it just doesn't suck. Because after many marathons, I've learned that running fast and having it feel good are very, very different things. So when I'm standing up there as a leader...
And it rarely happens.
It never feels good, but it feels better at the end.
When it happens.
When it happens, it's really good.
But that's why we train.
Exactly. Sometimes. But I think that when I'm standing up there, a lot of times I'll check in with people and say, here's an option. Does this feel good to you? Does this feel good in your body? Like if I'm standing up there as an instructor, I'll say to them, if you have a reason, any reason not to do this, please don't do it because I don't want you to. And I think that that's not always the greatest coaching for some people who need somebody to go like, come on, go harder, go faster. I can do that. But I actually think that a lot of people have an intrinsic awareness of what they need. And me supporting them, supporting that knowledge is really important. So if I say, find what feels good, if you know that it means pushing really hard today, push yourself. Like I support you in figuring out inside what you need and then doing it. And if it doesn't look like what I'm doing, that's okay. I will ask no questions unless you need help. If you need help, let me know I'm here. And so that's kind of how I like frame my leadership wherever I am across the board.
I love that. I get so much joy, from being in a coaching session, pacing session, leadership, or like a running session where I'm around people who are doing things in community, doing fitness in community, mostly running. And I just love being unplugged from anything that's not in the moment. And so I love to check in, give people hugs, check in people. The people who come to our runs, they know that I come and say hi to everyone and check in with them individually to see how they're doing. And then along the run, I don't run with music, don't even run with a watch. I'm probably the only person in here not wearing a watch, right? I just don't, because I really want to be there with the person who I'm running with. It could be in the front, it could be in the back, it could be in the middle of the pack. I really want to see what's going on because I really think that that's where you really connect with people. And I've learned a lot about people's journeys in their lives and where they're going, what their plans are, what their goals are. And I try to just instill a little bit of hope, joy along the way. And just thinking of it now, it's just like love being there and in the moment. And so depending on how that interaction goes, are we going to push harder or are we going to slow it down? Are we going to, add more workouts? Are we going to, suggest you seeing this or seeing that, PT or getting some new shoes or whatever it is that you may be. I think checking in with people from like a holistic approach and authentically really allows for them to check in on themselves and allows for me to then decide how I'm going to take that situation. And so I've been in places where I've like helped people run a little faster during that run or like shut it down a little bit. So it just, I don't know, it gets me super excited to be able to do that authentically. And part of the reason why I probably still do this is the connection part.
I love that emphasis of just understanding that everyone's having their own individual experience with it. I also have a background that's hard to sort of take the hat off. I'm a licensed mental health counselor by trade. I have a specialty in sports psychology. So my profession is sports psychology coaching. And so I think all the time about what people are thinking and what their experience is. And I think the framework that I bring with it is that I believe that everybody who has any kind of movement practice, whether it's running specifically or training in some particular way, whatever the sport is, that our movement practice is both a classroom and a laboratory for us as individuals. So It's a classroom where I can learn about myself. I'm going to figure out where my boundaries are. I'm going to figure out where I'm comfortable and where I get really uncomfortable. I'm going to figure out a lot about why I'm doing this and what matters to me. And that's if I'm paying attention to it. So I can just I can go for a run or do whatever that movement practice is and not really get anything from it. But if I choose to use it as a classroom, then I can learn a lot about myself. I can also use it as a laboratory in that I can develop myself. I can run little experiments. I can try it this way. I can try pushing a little bit harder and see, does that really feel uncomfortable and not good in my body? Or, oh shit, did I just open something up that I never really discovered before? And that's kind of exciting and painful, but exciting, right? So I look at that space and I think in a very similar way that you just described, Sid, I look for like, what do you need today? Like, are you here because you just need to be like amidst other people and like, that's it? Are you here because in your movement practice, you are trying to figure something out about yourself? Are you training for this marathon to be like, who am I in this world? Or are you really like trying to evolve? Are you trying to develop something new in yourself? And so in those ways, like that's my framework for it. That's really how I'm like, cool, this is so fun. Like, what are we discovering? Like, try this out with me. Come, let's do this. Like, try the whole thing. Or I might be challenging someone, to push forward, or even just being like, it's cool. Like, be here. Do you want a hug? And sometimes that's exactly it. So, very similar style.
It's my turn, I guess, huh? When I think about this question, I think a lot about how sport and specifically running related to this room is a lot about confidence, I think, and building confidence in yourself and the people around you as your teammates. And I think a really big part of what I see when I coach the sessions I coach with Heartbreak is, one, it's really brave to show up at a session to do fitness, whether that's running or November Project or even yoga. I think is very scary. So, it's really brave to show up. You're alone most of the time. You're not coming with a buddy. You're maybe a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you're not sure, that you wore the right thing or whatever it is. And I think like watching that confidence grow in people who do show up, speaking of showing up week after week, I think one of the most beautiful things about coaching and coaching through the sessions and the community that I've seen is the growth in all the different people who come back week after week. And they're really, they're making connections and they, want to go grab a beer with these people afterwards. And they really feel, they'll show up and they'll start being like, oh, well, Amy, last week we did this. And I'm like, you want to coach the session? So they really do start to kind of come into their own in that way. And I think for me personally, sport has always been something that's helped me feel like I belong and I have confidence within a group. And so I think acknowledging that takes a lot of bravery and courage to show up. And then when people do show up, acknowledging a little bit that it's brave and making sure that everybody feels welcome. So
love that. Emily, you used a word that I really liked, evolve. And it makes me think, I'm curious about how your connection or definition of community has evolved over the years and how that connection to fitness and fitness goals has evolved. For me, it was all about fast times at first. And that's all I cared about. I ran my first marathon and I was like, that was slow. And I was like, I want to run a marathon 36 minutes faster. And it didn't happen until I stopped caring about that time. And it became all about the people and the process and the experience. And so what I love through November Project and all of the other communities that I get to be a part of, I've run with Heartbreakers a lot, Tracksmith, all these other groups. It's the people for me that matter most. And you happen to get fitter along the way. And if that's a goal, great, cool. But for me, that's how it's evolved. I'm curious for you, and then we'll loop around.
Evolution. I grew up in Minnesota, in rural Minnesota, like on a 10-acre farm. And so like climbing trees and just chasing my brother, jumping off the roof of our house. That was how I started in like movement.
Is that CrossFit?
Yeah, definitely. and, and I became a collegiate athlete. And I think for me that there was a source of roots in like what is sport. So I always believed, I came to believe through my collegiate rowing experience that sport is a space where we can learn. We learn about ourselves. Like I finished my undergraduate career, and I realized that I had learned as much from my sport as I had from my academic education. And so my evolution, I think beyond that, has really been about how do I build this dual relationship between how do I want to challenge myself physically, and how do I also do it in a way that really matters to me. So that's actually what I hear. I'm like, I can't help but process what you just said.
It's a therapy session now.
It is. No, but you can. It's not that you stop caring about a goal, like that the time didn't just stop mattering to you, but you were also able to figure out what else matters to you and put as much emphasis into that, and like thereby both actually benefit. And so for me, as a runner and like in the run community, I've run several marathons, and for me, it really hasn't ever been about I'm going to try to have like the fastest time. But I think for me, the evolution has really been about how do I continue to do things in a way that really matters to me, that's personally meaningful, rather than just trying to do what I think I'm supposed to do because that's what the world tells me to do. If I could change one thing about the whole run community, it would be that there is not a single measure of success that is your finish line time. Like that's not true. There's a lot of other ways to measure success, and so I think I'm more emphatic about that. That doing what is meaningful to us, that's really what's going to matter at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the season, at the end of life. Did it matter to you? Did you feel proud of what you did, not just like the time? So,
Amy, it looks like you're itching to say something here.
I'm ready. I'm warmed up now. I think when I think about how my relationship with the running community has evolved, so I grew up playing soccer. I was always like a huge, and other team sports, but a big team sport person, and happened to, always loved running. It was kind of like a thing I did to stay in shape for soccer. But I walked onto my college D3 cross country team and was like, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be exactly like my soccer team in high school. They're going to be my best friends in the world. And that was absolutely not true at all. I had a really horrible experience, unfortunately. And I know that's not the case for many. So I left that experience with a really sour taste in my mouth, kind of like about the running community, unfortunately, and which is a whole other story. But I think because of that, for a long time, running was a very solo pursuit for me. It was something that I did alone. I only wanted to do it alone. I didn't want anyone to ask me about it. It was like a thing that I only did for myself. And to a point where people were like, should she be doing that much running like alone? I don't know. It was kind of like, some of my friends and family noticed. And I think moving to Boston and finding the Heartbreaker community has changed that so much for me. I mean, I think, from the moment that I was brave and decided to show up to my first practice, bought my first pair of shoes from this guy right here. But I think that aspect of community has like truly changed me, not to be dramatic, but I think, I've made some of the closest friends that I have met my fiance, it's a huge...
I was going to say, found your boo. Waiting for it. I was waiting for it.
Seth.
He's not here, weirdly.
What?
I know. I don't know what he's doing.
He was here.
He was here. He's probably getting a breakfast sandwich.
Heard that pancakes were good.
But anyway, my point is to say, I think my evolution of running is really described best by, something that really started as a very solo, kind of lonely pursuit is now something that I can't do it alone. I love my teammates. I love what I do. I love the community. That's my answer.
Cool.
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, which is creating experiences for communities of color. Because when I think of everything I've done, it always comes through that. Like, how can I better create an experience for communities of color? How can I take an experience that I've had in a community similar to what I had in my running community prior to Pioneers Run Crew? How can I take that and bring it to the communities that I represent, or that I'm from, or that I'm a part of. And in the evolution of that, I found the best success when I do things by not copying what other people are doing it my way, doing it a way that is authentic to the community that I'm cultivating. And that's true for Pioneers Run Crew. And that's true for my apparel line, Pioneers Performance Streetwear, to the point that we have a pop-up on Newbury Street, a Black-owned running apparel company with a pop-up on Newbury Street alongside the big boys, I think doing it your way and just realizing that nobody knows what they're doing.
Yes.
And then going back to what I said earlier, being a little bit naive as to how hard things are, actually allow you to try things. So I've, the evolution of like not trying to copy exactly what that group, that person, that community, or that company is doing. I've evolved to be able to do it my own way and found a lot of joy, success, and cultivated like a really dope group of friends, community, and all that fun stuff. So, yeah.
I don't think that I can really explain my experience of the community and how I sort of evolved in my understanding without really sort of giving little vignettes into why I feel so differently. My first official marathon, I was one of those bandit runners back when it was not as awful as it is now, but I did it. But my first official marathon was about 1.5 years into my time with November Project. And I thought that it was like the societal narrative of initiation into the running community is that you do a marathon.
Wait, it's not?
And even better if you BQ. And so I ran this marathon and I finished with a BQ. But the problem was it wasn't actually a success because I had been in the hospital days earlier for mental illness and I hadn't eaten in days. And so I finished and was about to collapse when I found my very good friend, Emily, who was like, oh my God, you're not okay. And all I remember is that a bunch of November Project people were so concerned about how I was, and not a single person cared about my time because they were so concerned, like, holy crap, you're really not okay. We have to get you home. We have to get you dry. We have to get you warm. And so I think about that experience, and I didn't realize in that moment that that wasn't actually I don't think I had the capacity to really understand how bad that was. And years later, I can look back at it and say, that's because I believed so strongly that the way to be accepted into the community was to do the thing that everybody else is doing, but it wasn't actually good for me in that moment. So I did it. It was not a success. And it's taken many years and a lot of treatment. And I continue to sort of it's never something that I won't struggle with. But I've gotten to a point where in 2019, I was running Chicago and I said to Coach Emily, I think I'm just going to do my own thing. I don't actually have any goals. I'm just going to kind of go out there and wing it. And if I don't want to finish, I'm not going to, and I will walk off the course and go get pizza. She was like, okay, great. And I remember at mile 21, I called her and was like, I just need to talk to you. I'm fine. I just need to talk to you because I just need to walk for a minute. And she was like, okay, good. Do you want to keep walking? And at that point I was already running because I was like, no, I'm ready to go run again. And I wasn't looking at my watch. I wasn't paying attention to anything else. It's just that I had this felt sense in the moment that I needed the community. I didn't need the time on the clock. I didn't actually care what it was because I wasn't paying attention to my watch. I had no idea what time I was running. I just knew I just need my people right now. And I'm about to run to the NPCHI cheer squad, but I think I need something before that because I'm not actually okay right now. And I think that if I look back on the societal narrative of what I initially believed, which is that one must attain the BQ. And then furthermore, what is it? Sub 310, sub 3, whatever it is, I wouldn't have stopped running. I wouldn't have listened to myself and then drawn that energy I needed from the community. But instead, I had that awareness after many sort of failed attempts and learned wisdom that actually was exactly what I needed. Who cares what a coach would have said about it? And I was able to go on and finish. And I actually felt really great about it. And I called Emily in my last 800 meters and said, we're about to run over the finish line. Stay on the phone with me. And I think she probably heard blah, 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 blah. Because like we're in the marathon. And I stopped my watch when I crossed the finish line and I was like, oh my God, I just ran the fastest marathon I've ever run in my entire life. Like, because I felt good, because I listened to myself, because I drew from the community and I wasn't really worried about what anybody else felt about my running. I was just taking care of myself. And I think that's really the most important lesson that we can sort of glean from each other.
Dana, I believe this is the point where you drop your mic. Thank you all for sharing such wisdom with us and opening up to these stories. Thank you to Brooks for facilitating this. And thank you all to being here and listening to us ramble about running and life for about an hour. Thanks, guys.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.